Welcome to the Live Wire. I'm Meg Whalen. I'm the Director of Communications for the College of Arts and Architecture. And today we're going to talk about a really interesting collaborative project that the university is involved in called Keeping Watch. Keeping Watch is a 3-year initiative, and this is the second year of it. And it is directed by 2 institutions in our university, the College of Arts and Architecture and the UNC Charlotte Urban Institute. And so today I have with me Mary Newsom from the Urban Institute and Crista Cammaroto, our Director of Galleries for the College of Arts and Architecture. And we're going to talk about the second year of Keeping Watch on Water, City of Creeks. So first, let's talk a little bit about what Keeping Watch is overall. It's a 3-year partnership and initiative and involves lots of people from across this campus and across the community. So tell us a little bit about what Keeping Watch is all about.
Well, it became a kind of triumvirate between Mary Newsom, myself, and June Lambla with Lambla Artworks. Mary actually instigated it as we were office mates, and those cubicles kind of help collaboration at times. And we were talking about something that she was applying for and wanted to do a lot of writing and art about the creeks. And she jumped in last year, and so did June. Last year was Keeping Watch on Plastics, and we had a beautiful arrangement of all kinds of different things for that. And this year was really focused on your initiative with the City of Creeks and this whole idea of creeks and why our city developed the way it did.
Yeah, so why are creeks important and what got you interested in creeks?
Creeks are important for a lot of reasons. What got me interested is that people in Mecklenburg County tend to not realize that we have a network of 3,000 miles of creeks in this county. It's an amazingly connected lacework of waterways threading all through the community. Connects neighborhood to neighborhood to neighborhood. The creeks flow into the rivers flow into lakes, into the ocean. But people don't realize that. People here tend to say, we don't have a river, we don't have a port, we don't have a mountain. And then they stop. And I wish they would say, but we have this amazing network of creeks. So that's part of what got me interested. The other thing is that I have a creek on the street where I live, and I've watched it for decades. It's fascinating. So I wanted to highlight the existence of this network to people throughout our community.
Yeah, I think I read in some of your materials there are 126 named creeks in Mecklenburg County. That's a huge number. Who would have thought that there are that many creeks?
Yes, 81 of them have actual names. The rest have names like tributary of Briar Creek or tributary of. But I did a little rundown of counting up. There's 6 of the creeks are named for McSomethings: McDowell, McCullough, McMullen, McKee. I can't remember them all right now. It's really, once you start digging in, McAlpine is one. Once you start digging into the history and the geography, it becomes fascinating. I've become a real creek geek, if you will.
Well, I'm going to show some pictures. One of our chief collaborators in this whole project is a photographer named Nancy Pierce. She's a photojournalist, and she's very interested in issues of the environment and particularly in what's happening in Charlotte, local urban issues and things that happen in our county. That comes from her photojournalist background. And so we have lots of pictures by her. This is an image that she did, and this is actually the homepage of our new website that's all about Keeping Watch. Mary, tell us a little bit about the website and what people can find here.
KeepingWatch.org is the website that we've created specifically for this project. The material there is going to be posted simultaneously at PlanCharlotte.org, which is one of the Urban Institute's websites. But you'll find a series of 5 in-depth articles about the creeks of Charlotte and the greenways of Charlotte, and lots and lots of photos and videos and the events and exhibitions schedule. Right now, that's the only thing on the website, but we are working like mad to get the other articles there in time for the opening next Friday.
Yeah, so plancharlotte.org and keepingwatch.org are two places to really dig deeper about the creeks. So this is an image of the new greenway, and we're going to see a picture in a minute that shows how this came to be. But this is a picture by Nancy Pierce, another beautiful image. So on the one hand, we have these beautiful creeks, and they create such a lovely landscape for us, and we're going to see some of the beautiful images. And then, of course, our creeks are troubled. When I was a little girl, there was a creek near, I just thought of this, there was a creek near where I lived called Troublesome Creek. Isn't that a great name for a creek? And you had to cross over Troublesome Creek to go from my little town to Raleigh, North Carolina, and there were always turtles crossing the street, and we would stop and snatch them from the jaws of death, is what my dad would say when we'd stop and rescue those turtles at Troublesome Creek. But some of our creeks are troubled, and we'll see some of those pictures too. Here's Nancy Pierce, who is the photojournalist who's worked with us, and we'll have a lot of her images in the gallery, right?
Yeah, at least 21, and there'll be some up in the front window also with some of Bill Stokes' basketballs that he's retrieved from all the creeks.
That's right. We're going to have in the window at Center City, UNC Charlotte Center City, in the Projective Eye Gallery.
And some of the things, like the image that you just showed of Nancy Pierce's, I thought was really interesting because it shows how grown over our creeks are. And that's the real reason, I think, in some ways, that people don't know how to relate to them. They're like the little green patches of town, or the place where the poison ivy is, the place where you don't go. And this whole project really aims to get people to go there in several different ways, through her images, and through all the artwork that's being created for the exhibit, and all the writing that's being done, and all the research, and all the oral histories that have been collected.
Yeah, so Mary, talk a little bit as we're looking at some of these pictures about the research that you've done and your team out of the UNC Charlotte Urban Institute.
Well, this image that you're looking at is on Westfield Drive in Myers Park. It's behind the Park Road Shopping Center. And I just today got a historic photo from 1997, I guess that's history by now, of when it was a street full of houses that would flood regularly, water up to the windows. The county bought those houses and created this beautiful greenway. You were talking about Troublesome Creek. Little Sugar Creek in Charlotte has been known as a nuisance for much of its history. It smelled horrible. It was so polluted that a 1969 Charlotte News investigation called it a sewer called sugar. 1907 newspaper called it a death-dealing nuisance. So what we hope to show is the long history of the waters that were pristine at one point, and then that we, the human beings who live here, really did terrible things to. And how in recent years we are trying to retrofit and recover some of the waters so that they can be amenities for citizens.
One of the great stories that Nancy brings to light, and Nancy and Mary together really, is the uncapping of Sugar Creek.
Right, and we have a picture of that, which we'll get to in one second. Here's a photograph of the convergence of two creeks, right?
Yes, on the right is Briar Creek.
My two favorite creeks.
Those are your favorite. Yeah, I love those. I love this
them.
photo, and I love it that Crista's going to be able to display these images really big and beautifully in the gallery.
Printed them in.
That's Briar Creek on the right and Little Sugar Creek on the left. You can see this scene in the winter if you drive on Tybola Road and look north.
And you won't lucky enough to have the snow.
You won't always see the snow, but you can see the creeks.
Now here is part of Little Sugar Creek that only shows a little bit of the creek, and you can see what has happened to so many of our creeks, which is that they've been covered up by parking lots or streets or whatever. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, this picture is taken from the air. Obviously the street at the top is Sugar Creek Road, named for Sugar Creek. The building is the grocery store there, and you can see the creek just sort of emerges. You can see it from the air. I never knew that creek was
down
visible there
Mm-hmm.
until I saw this photo. Now, of course, I drive down Sugar Creek and I can see it because I know where to look.
We know where now I do too.
But
Thanks to our
this is
project.
a really great example of
Yeah.
how even when you think you're aware of these things, you can go right over them and not even realize that you're going over. This is very near the headwaters of Little Sugar Creek, so the creek is kind of tiny there.
Yeah. And then here is, as Crista was
The
talking about, this is when the creek was uncovered, and people may recognize in the photograph where we are. It's along Kings Drive, right in the Midtown area. If you know Mama Ricotta's restaurant, it's right behind that bulldozer thing or steam shovel, whatever that thing is over there. So talk a little bit about the story of how this creek got covered up
a
and
great
then how
story.
it got uncovered.
Both of the stories are
The
great.
creek got covered up in 1959 when a developer named Jim Rouse built Charlottetown Mall. If you're an old timer, you remember Charlottetown Mall. It was the first covered shopping mall in the Southeast. And it was September, I think. And Jim Rouse came down and told the civil engineer working on the project, a guy named Pete Verna, who did a lot of projects in Charlotte, told Pete, we've got to have more parking. Cover the creek. So Pete Verna covered the creek. And the creek stayed covered for decades until the city and the county and a developer, Peter A. Pappas, decided to build the project that's called the Metropolitan. And they pooled their money, they pooled their resources, and they decided to uncap the creek. They got money from a lot of different places, including the State Clean Water Management Trust Fund, and demolish the cap. I remember there was a Mexican restaurant that we used to go to. I think it was right about where that shovel is. And now it's a fabulous greenway.
It is.
Yeah.
Brings people to the water in ways that they were never brought to the water
Well, and I
before.
think it is our greenway system that is starting to make people more aware of the fact that we have so many creeks, because they do walk along the creeks at so many of those places. Of course, a lot of our creeks are troubled. They are polluted. This is sort of a picture that converges year one of keeping watch
It
on
does.
plastics,
Yeah.
with year two of keeping watch on water, because in here you see a lot of plastic, a lot of plastic
Single-use
bottles
bottles.
and
Yeah.
bags. And Mary, tell us a little bit about the relative health of the creeks right now in Mecklenburg County.
The plastic that you see is annoying and noxious and not good for the environment, but that's not really what's polluting our creeks today. The sad fact is all of the creeks in Mecklenburg County are what's called impaired, which means they're not performing up to the standards that have been set. And those standards are not very high. They are not expected to be suitable for swimming, for instance. But what's polluting our creeks today is not evil factories with evil pipes and evil midnight dumpers, although that does occasionally happen. But what's polluting our creeks today is water that runs off of pavement and lawns and rooftops. It's called stormwater runoff. It carries sediment and it smothers the life in the creek. The other pollutant is, this is kind of disgusting, I'm sorry, it's called fecal bacteria, and it's from waste, human and animal waste.
Do you think it's more animal, obviously?
That's
People walking their dogs?
That's an interesting question, and in fact, the Charlotte Water, the department formerly known as CMUD, the utility department, has done tests here and there to try to determine the answer to that question, because a lot of the bacterial contamination does come from sewer line overflows, and they're trying hard to reduce the number of those. They've done tests, and one at Stewart Creek, they did a lot of tests, and most of the bacteria was from sewers. Well, let me say it was a human waste. We were assuming it was sewers. They did some others at Little Sugar Creek probably 10 years ago, and it was very random. In some places it was human waste, in some places it was domestic animal, canine waste, in other places it was wildlife.
Right.
So the answer is it just depends.
Just depends.
And it's the fertilizer for the lawns that really helps promote algae in the
Yes,
creek. And
yes. Fertilizers and
the
lawns.
green lawn and the creek are not friends.
Right, fertilizers and lawns are a real problem. What they do is they send extra nutrients into the creek, and that causes algae to, you fertilize the algae, and the algae sucks up all the oxygen in the water, and so nothing else can live because there's no oxygen. A lot of older cities, the storm sewers and the sanitary sewers was one set of pipes. And in a heavy rain, the sewers would back up into people's basements. That's not a good situation.
that's
It's
not a
actually
good
better to have the setup that we have here.
Oh, okay.
But the point is, most people don't realize that that storm drain is not going to a sewage treatment plant. It's going straight into the creek. So they'll dump paint, they'll dump anything down there, thinking, I guess, that it's going to magically vanish.
Right.
But it doesn't. The water goes right into our creeks.
And how about construction waste and sediment? That seems to be a real issue.
Yeah, sediment is mud, and it comes from construction sites. It just comes from streets.
But doesn't the clay, unearthed clay from the construction site kind of impair the banks of the creek?
Yes.
So that it then has to go down further and further and it carves?
I think what carves is probably just the speed and the velocity of the storm water. And in years past, they kind of straightened the creeks, thinking that would prevent flooding. But what it did was just speed up the water, caused even more erosion.
Well,
Nice
here's
creek
someone actually cleaning up a creek, and you know, we are through this project encouraging people to become aware of their creeks and also to take some interest and some active interest in their creeks. We have about, I don't know, 20 different partners and sponsors involved, and this is a huge web of partners among city, county, private, nonprofit organizations, all kinds of university groups, arts groups. It's just a great set of partnerships, and one of our key partners this year for keeping watch on water is Charlotte-Mecklenburg Storm Water Services. And I believe they have on their website all kinds of ways, a list of half a dozen ways that you can volunteer and go clean up a creek or get involved in your water
Or keep a
system,
watch on
or
your water
keep a
quality
watch
and report.
on- Yeah, and so I encourage people to look at the Charmec Stormwater Services site if they're interested in doing that. We are going to have some creek walks. We're not going to necessarily clean them up, although if we see some garbage, we'll pick it up, right?
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about the creek walks and when they will be and what they'll be
Well,
like.
the creek walks are really in relationship to a lot of what Charlotte-Mecklenburg Stormwater Services has done, which is created more of a buffer zone around the creeks. And that is a really great urban place to experience, and we're trying to encourage people to do that. You know, we have an urbanist department, you know, where we actually, and you're of that too, I mean, of that ilk of this greater urban planning. So to have people out and about around the creeks is one of the things we wanted to do, and actually experiencing the creeks. So we do have a series of walks along some of the creeks, not all of them. One of them will be during Jane's Walks. Also, in May 2nd and 3rd, we'll do Revolution Park and Stewart Creek on May 2nd, and then on May 3rd, you will do Sugar Creek.
Little Sugar Creek.
Little Sugar Creek, which is part of that greenway that has been uncapped.
Yes.
And then we will also have another walk and paddle a little further down the road. I think we're going to have to change that to June 4th.
Okay.
But that will be a walk along McDowell Creek, and then also a walk and paddle. And the river keepers will be a big part of that, and they'll be providing all the boats, and it will
that sounds
also,
fun.
it'll illustrate that relationship of watershed creek. Drinking water and your creek have something to do with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of these things, as the details are firmed up, people can go to the keepingwatch.org website to find out where to meet if they want to take one of these walks and how to get more information. So that'll be the place to look. Of course, this is an artistic endeavor. It's not just about hiking and research, but it's actually about creating works of art that then explore these ideas more deeply or reflect on them in different ways and from different perspectives. And so we have in the Projective Eye Gallery, we're going to have work in addition to Nancy Pierce's photographs. We'll have work by 3 artists. This on the screen here is one of our professors, Marek Ranis, who is a professor in our Department of Art and Art History. He's in the red hat. And Crista, tell us a little bit about what he is creating for the gallery for City of Creeks.
Well, Marek is a really interesting artist in that he is very experiential in his environmental ways and views, and wants to bring in this kind of idea of metaphor with that. And so he decided to work on a series of interviews with religious and spiritual leaders to ask them and kind of bring a more personal, ethical, moral avenue to this environmentalism and ask them what is their relationship to water and the creek, and what is their relationship and their sense of responsibility in dealing with and taking care of something like that. Because a lot of spiritual and religious organizations are very good at taking care of people, but maybe not the environment yet. And so I think he's really trying to shift the paradigm in that way by doing this piece and focus on that particular service aspect also. But he's also done a lot of on-site landscape work, which he's very good at with his film crew and some, I know you have a drone image in there somewhere
so
too.
the imagery that he's gathered for this, and it's called Stewardship, this
Yes.
film that we'll be showing in the gallery, and we'll also show on a night in its entirety on one of our film nights. But he's gathered imagery by using a drone with a camera in it, and he tell us the path that drone took.
Well, I think he's going from Sullivan's Island in through some of our creeks and following the creeks all the way through their fruition into the Catawba. So where they've originated, some of them have originated and where they're flowing out to.
Yeah, so I think he started at one little neighborhood in Charlotte where a little teeny piece of creek was
coming out like a
and
spring,
then
as
followed
you've
it
mentioned many times.
all the way down to the sea. So
all the way down to the mountains to sea is part of
Yeah.
our claim to fame
and there's
in North Carolina.
another picture of the drone. And then this is another artist who will be not only in the gallery, but who's doing an educational installation out in the community, Stacy Levy. Tell us a little bit about her and what she's doing.
Stacy Levy is another very powerful artist. I mean, she is out there in the environment all the time and has done work around the world and certainly around our country a lot. And we're sharing her with the McCall Center this year, which I think is a very nice thing that we both get to do. She is creating a piece basically to use the idea of water and to show a metaphor, a sculptural metaphor called Passage of Rain, and bring to light this idea that this water and this rain that's coming down is passing underneath your feet at the very moment that you're walking on it. And people don't understand in this highly urbanized, engineered environment that the water is still somewhere. It doesn't just disappear. It has to flow, it still has to go somewhere, and we're still related to it. So it harkens to bring that relationship back up, that we're still related to this flowing mass of water underneath us, and it's part of our system.
This image is a piece she did in Philadelphia, a street lagoon that shows the passage of water that is under the street. The work she's going to do here is going to be in Revolution Park, and it's in the west part of Charlotte. You can see some of the streets in the area. It's going to be over almost a mile, 8/10 of a mile pathway to show the passage of rain when it falls, what's it doing under your feet, and you can't see it. Here's a mock-up with the red line of the actual installation along West Boulevard, and here's what it might look like. This is not the real thing because it will be installed on March 28th, Saturday.
Exactly, so
and people
right after the
can
opening.
Volunteer to come and be a
Yes.
part of it if they wish. And
We have a doodle poll that we would love to get everybody involved in, but you can please come to the opening on March 27th, and we will have a meeting just prior to that with anybody who wants to volunteer. We'll feed you, we'll make sure it's fun, and you will be laying down paint where the artist wants us to. Stacy is going to draw this out beforehand, and people will be helping us paint along the sidewalk of West Boulevard, going across the yard of the Greater Mount Sinai Baptist Church, and they've been wonderful partners also, and then through the ball fields, across Behringer and through the ball fields of the Revolution Park.
this sort of shows along areas of creek, some of the projected installation too. Which
Yeah, and these stakes indicate different kinds of plantings that Stacy's encouraging to help better the life and the absorption quality of the creek right there. It's actually changing as part of this project as we speak.
Yeah. Another artist we have is Lauren Rosenthal, and she has Before we leave Stacy Levy, though, we ought to also mention that she
Yes.
is creating what we call Watershed Pantry, which will be a huge wall of jars of water from creeks all over the county.
Yes, and many people are collecting these waters, and CMS and Trinity Episcopal are also doing water samples.
Yeah, lots of
and
school
curriculum.
children of all ages who are going out and collecting and analyzing creek water and bringing it to us. So
Our
that's a
own
really
STEM education program.
exciting thing, and it'll be fun to see when it all comes together. And then Lauren Rosenthal, who's creating or has created this amazing, humongous, wall-sized cut paper map
Yes.
of the creek system.
And she's doing that by she kind of takes away all the streets and everything else, and you're left with this really clear hydrological awareness of where the creek actually runs. And it, a lot like Stacy's work, but in a different way, it kind of raises up the image of the creek in your psyche and in your geographical kind of awareness of the place where you live, so that you have a better understanding. Oh, I'm related to that creek, and here's here, and then there will be a reference map close to it with cross streets, much smaller,
Right.
so that you can actually find where you are on the map and then locate yourself on the map too.
Larger map.
And she's created a large home basin website.
Right, which we
also.
have a screenshot of that. So she has this remarkable, huge, beautiful cut paper map, and we had the image of her actually cutting the paper, and so it's sort of has this textural quality, and it's very elegant.
It's
and
extremely elegant,
Yeah,
and all
it
of the
really
papers have
is.
different colors and different pigments on them.
yeah,
and
just aesthetically, it's remarkable.
she's a remarkable artist that
yeah,
way, and she really does speak for the river in a sense. She
Yeah.
really knows how to aesthetically make that very apparent, and I think the cut paper and that layering, and the fact that the river is actually going to be the deepest of that layer, and that you'll have to look through other layers to the river, is very much like how you experience it in life.
And then she's created this interactive website-based program, home based. And Mary, tell us a little bit. This resides on keepingwatch.org.
This will reside at keepingwatch.org. It's not quite finished yet. We're still tweaking the details. But Lauren designed this, and Wes Lawing, who works at the Institute, has worked with her on the web development. And this is it's a huge map, and those points are places where you can zoom in and see a photo or see a video of reminiscences, or just see a little story that relates to that photo.
History.
And we're inviting people to submit their own creek stories and creek photos to this interactive website.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. It's wonderful to be able to gather all these different media together, stories and images and videos and history and science and art all in one place. In addition, we have some other events. Of course, we have our big opening reception, March 27th. That's a week from this Friday, a week from tomorrow, March 27th at Projective Eye Gallery uptown at UNC Charlotte Center City. And then we'll have 2 film screenings.
Yes.
Lost Rivers will be the first film, and that's on
Rivers.
April 9th, and we'll have a panel
We'll have a
conversation
panel.
around that.
Yes, and we're doing that with the Integrated Network for Social Sustainability. They're our partner for that, and the panel is very much stewarded by Brett Tempest, one of our own professors. He's also a Revolution Park neighborhood association leader, and that's where Stacy Levy's piece is going to be. But these events are very community-based, and they're very lively and fun forum, and they're a wonderful place to talk and think and have good discourse along with a movie.
Yeah, and the second film we'll show is called Watermark. We will also show very brief local films, Marek's film Stewardship on April 9th, and a film by Ben Primo on, I believe this is May 1st, that we show
yes.
Watermark. All of these events can be found either at keepingwatch.org or on our website for arts events, arts.uncc.edu. And again, we hope that people will come for the initial event on March 27th and then continue throughout the next really almost 3 months.
We have all kinds of
we have all
events.
kinds
You can
of
engage
things
with your
happening.
creek over and over again, and with
Yes.
us. Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon and starting this really interesting conversation. I hope people will continue to be noticing and talking about and appreciating our creeks in Mecklenburg County.